Number 1. The Man in the Corner. When Daniel first moved into apartment 4B, it seemed perfect. Affordable, close to his work, and just big enough for a single guy trying to find his footing in a new city. The building was old, sure, but it had character. Creaky floors, old brass fixtures, and a faint scent of wood polish lingering in the halls. He barely noticed the bedroom's odd layout at first. It was rectangular, but one of the corners seemed off. The wall there was slightly discolored, as if it had been patched and repainted too many times. No matter how Daniel rearranged his furniture, he couldn't help but feel that the far corner was somehow the heart of the room, a quiet, watchful presence pressing into his peripheral vision whenever he tried to sleep. At first he brushed it off. After all, he was tired, stressed, and adjusting to a whole new life. It made the sense that he'd feel unsettled in a strange place. But every night, just after the clock struck 3, Daniel would wake up suddenly, heart pounding, sheets clinging to his sweaty skin. And every time, without fail, his eyes would be drawn to that corner. It was always empty. Always. And yet, the feeling that someone, or something, stood there, silently watching him, grew stronger with each passing night. By the second week, Daniel started leaving a night light on. It was a ridiculous comfort, like something a kid would do, but somehow the soft glow made the corner seem less threatening. Until the night light went out. It was a Tuesday, and Daniel had fallen into an exhausted sleep after a long shift. Around 3:15 a.m. he stirred. His room was bathed in deep, oppressive darkness, as if the night had swallowed the faint light completely. Blinking rapidly, trying to adjust, he sat up and froze. He could hear it. Breathing. Slow. Ragged. Coming from the far corner. Daniel held his breath, straining his ears. Maybe it was the old building, pipes, neighbors, something mundane. But the breathing was rhythmic, almost deliberate, and it wasn't fading away. Terrified, Daniel flicked on the bedside lamp. Warm light flooded the room instantly, and the breathing stopped. The corner was empty, silent, and perfectly still. He barely slept the rest of the night. The next day he couldn't shake the thought of it. By lunchtime, Daniel had convinced himself he was being irrational. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. Maybe he needed proof that there was nothing there, proof to show himself it was all in his head. That evening he set up his phone on a stack of books, propping it up so it pointed straight at the suspicious corner. He hits record and crawls into bed, feeling foolish but determined. He drifted into a fitful sleep, the soft red glow of the recording light blinking faintly across the room. When he woke the next morning, sunlight streamed through the cracked blinds. For the first time in days, Daniel actually felt rested. Relieved, he grabbed his phone eagerly, heart pounding with anticipation. He fast-forwarded through hours of nothing, him tossing, turning, snoring quietly. Until the timestamp hits 3:14 a.m. The screen flickered. Static lines run down the footage, distorting the image. And then, there it was. A figure. Tall. Unnaturally thin. Standing perfectly still in the corner. Its body was too long, its limbs slightly bent at disturbing angles like a puppet with cut strings. His head was tilted slightly as if it were studying him. Its face, or what should have been a face, was blurred, almost melting into the shadows. Daniel watched, frozen in horror, as the figure took one slow, dragging step forward. Then another. The creature crept closer to his bed, silent and jerky, the movement wrong in a way that made Daniel's stomach twist. Right before reaching the edge of the mattress, the screen went black. The footage ended. Daniel sat back, breathing hard, heart hammering against his ribs. He wanted to believe it was some glitch, some trick of the light, but deep down he knew. Something was in that apartment with him. That day Daniel didn't go to work. He packed his essentials into a backpack, called his boss to explain vaguely that he had an emergency, and made plans to stay with his friend Jake across town for a few days. But as he was packing, he noticed something. In the corner, the same corner where the figure had stood, the carpet was worn down as if someone had been standing there for hours. The fibers were flattened in the shape of two large, splayed feet. He stared, unable to move, his mind racing with the implications. He hadn't imagined it. He wasn't crazy. Something had been there. Still was, maybe. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed his bag and bolted from the apartment, not going online to look back. At Jake's place, Daniel tried to relax. Jake listened patiently to his story, though he raised an eyebrow more than once. "Dude, you're probably just stressed out. New place, new job, new city. You know how your mind can mess with you," Jake said, clapping him on the back. Daniel wanted to believe that. God, he wanted to believe it. That night, Daniel crashed on Jake's couch, exhausted. He left all the lights on, including the kitchen lamp and bathroom light, and buried himself under a blanket like a child. At number 2. The last train home. No one liked to ride the last train. It wasn't because of crime or the late hour. It was something else. Something older. Something that lurked between the stations, hidden beneath the city's crumbling foundations. Evan didn't believe any of those stories, of course. He was a practical man, a graphic designer who just stayed too late at the office finishing a last-minute project. So when the clock hit 12:45 a.m., he slung his bag over his shoulder and jogged down to the subway platform. The station was almost deserted, except for an old man slumped on a bench, muttering softly to himself. Evan gave him a wide berth, glancing once at the cracked, grimy tile walls that seemed to close in tighter at night. The train screeched into the station a few minutes later, empty except for a single car light flickering at the end. Evan stepped in. The doors closed with a hiss and the train lurched forward into the tunnels. At first, everything seemed normal. The familiar sway of the train, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on metal tracks. Evan pulled out his phone, but there was no signal this deep underground. No surprise there. Minutes passed. Stations blurred by, names he didn't recognize, written in faded paint and old Cyrillic letters. Some stations weren't even lit, just darkness broken by the occasional glint of abandoned debris. He had taken this line dozens of times. He frowned. He had taken this line dozens of times and he didn't remember these stops. An uneasy prickle crawled up his spine. Across from him sat a woman. At least he thought it was a woman. She wore a tattered gray dress that hung off her like old curtains. Her face was turned toward the window, and her hair, greasy and matted, obscured most of her features. Evan hadn't noticed her get on. Trying not to stare, he shifted in his seat and checked the station map above the door. But the map was wrong. It was written in some strange script he couldn't read, harsh, angular shapes that almost looked like claws scratching across the surface. The train didn't stop. It just kept barreling forward into deeper, darker tunnels. Evan's heart began to pound harder in his chest. He stood up and moved toward the next car, intending to find the conductor. Maybe he had fallen asleep. Maybe this was some weird maintenance route. There had to be an explanation. The door to the next car was stuck. Evan yanked harder, gritting his teeth, and finally it screeched open. The next car was pitch black. The only light came from the car Evan had just left. But even that light seemed to fade as if the darkness was swallowing it. And in that blackness, Evan saw shapes. Figures. Standing motionless between the rows of seats, packed shoulder to shoulder. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just watched him with hollow, empty eyes that caught the dim light like the glass eyes of dolls. Evan stumbled back in horror, slamming the door shut. The woman in the gray dress was now standing, facing him fully. Her face was wrong. Blurred. Like wet clay smeared by a careless hand. Her mouth stretched too wide, a gaping hole where teeth should have been. Her arms hung limply at her sides, but her fingers twitched and jerked as if pulling invisible strings. The train slowed down. Evan spun around and saw a station approaching, but it wasn't any station he knew. The platform was cracked and broken, lined with ancient pillars that leaned drunkenly to one side. The name of the station was scrawled in blood-red paint. Last stop. The train screeched to a stop, and the doors opened with a groan. Cold, wet air rushed in. The figures from the dark car spilled forward, moving in that same jerky, puppet-like manner. The woman in gray was among them, her featureless face tilted toward him, mouth yawning wider. Evan backed away, but there was nowhere to go. Something grabbed his ankle. He looked down. A child's hand, pale and bony, was reaching up from beneath the seat, clutching him with a desperate, unnatural strength. He kicked free and bolted out of the train onto the platform. For a moment he thought he was safe. The platform stretched out endlessly in both directions, disappearing into thick, oily fog. No signs, no exits, no sounds except the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the blackness. He turned back. The train was gone. Just empty tracks, vanishing into the mist. And then he heard them. Footsteps. Soft, wet footsteps getting closer. Evan ran blindly into the fog, his breath burning in his lungs, his heart a hammer in his chest. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. The footsteps multiplied, echoing from every direction. He stumbled over broken tiles, past rusted metal beams, past shattered glass cases holding advertisements for long-dead businesses. His mind screamed at him to stop, to hide, to do something. Then he saw it, a service door slightly open, a sliver of light leaking through. He threw himself at it, squeezing through the gap just as cold fingers brushed the back of his shirt. Inside was a maintenance tunnel, narrow, claustrophobic, crying of mold and rot. Amazed. For what felt like hours, he ran, the darkness pressing tighter and tighter around him. His flashlight app barely pierced the gloom. Every so often he heard a scrape behind him, a whisper in a language he couldn't understand. Finally, the tunnel ended at a rusted metal ladder. Without hesitation, Evan climbed, his hands slipping on the wet rungs. Up and up, higher and higher, until he was slammed into a trapdoor. He pushed number 3. Whispers from room 413. When Maya first moved into the dorms of Hollow Creek University, she thought the old stories were just that, stories. Don't take room 413, the seniors warned her, half joking, half serious. Bad things happen in that room. But room 413 was cheap, available, and Maya wasn't superstitious. The room was tucked at the end of the 4th floor hallway, with a single narrow window overlooking the woods behind campus. It smelled faintly of mildew when she moved in, and the floorboards creaked under every step. Still, Maya shrugged it off. First night went fine. The second night, that's when things started. At around 2:13 a.m., Maya was woken by a noise. It wasn't loud, just a soft, dry whisper like paper crumpling. She sat up in bed, heart hammering, staring into the darkness. The whispering stopped. She told herself it was the wind and lay back down, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The next night it happened again. This time it was louder, clear enough that she could make out the faint shapes of words. Come here. Come closer. Let us in. Maya sat frozen in bed, eyes locked on the closet door. She hadn't left it open. But now it was just a crack. From the darkness inside, she thought she saw the faint glint of 2 small, pale eyes watching her. She didn't sleep much after that. During the day she tried to laugh it off. She even told her roommate across the hall, Lacey, who joked, "Maybe your room's haunted by a bored librarian or something." But Maya noticed things. The water in 413 was always colder than the rest of the building. Her mirror is constantly fogged, even when there is no heat. Sometimes, when she looked at her reflection, she thought she saw something standing behind her. Thin, gray, smiling too wide. One evening, while studying, she found scratches on her desk, words carved into the wood that hadn't been there before. Don't look under the bed. Maya stared at it, feeling sick. She hadn't told anyone about the whispers. Hadn't told anyone about the closet door opening on its own. Hadn't told anyone she had started hearing knocking from beneath her bed. The next night was worse. Maya stayed up, lights on, music playing softly, trying to drown out the growing feeling of dread. Around 3 a.m. the music cuts off. Her lamp flickered. The knocking started again, slow, deliberate, coming from under the bed. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying it would stop. Knock, 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 knock. Then a whisper right by her ear. Maya. Her eyes flew open. The closet door swung fully open with a groan. Inside was pure blackness, swallowing even the dim light of the room. Something moved inside, a shape, unfolding, stepping forward on legs that bent wrong, its hands dragging long, broken fingernails against the wood. Maya bolted. She didn't stop to grab her phone or her shoes. She just ran down the hall, pounding on Lacey's door until she opened it, bleary-eyed and confused. Maya slept on Lacey's floor that night. She didn't tell her anything, only that something was wrong with room 413. In the morning they went back. Together. The room was cold as a meat locker and Maya's breath misted in the air. Everything looked normal, except the scratches on the desk were deeper now, carved violently, spelling a new message. Too late. Her mattress had been pulled halfway off the frame. And underneath it, something was scratched into the floorboards. Welcome home. Lacey muttered, we need to get you out of here. Maya didn't argue. She packed her things fast, heart thundering, eyes flicking to every shadow. When she pulled her suitcase from under the bed, something snagged, caught on something sticky. With a shaking hand, she yanked it free. A thin piece of cloth was attached, old, stained, and when she looked closer she realized it wasn't cloth at all. It was skin. Maya moved out of 413 that afternoon. The dorm manager didn't ask questions. Didn't even seem surprised. She stayed with Lacey for the rest of the semester. But the whispers didn't stop. Even in Lacey's room late at night, Maya sometimes woke to soft, scratching sounds against the window, even though they were on the 4th floor. Sometimes her phone buzzed with texts from an unknown number. Come back. We miss you. Once, half asleep, she rolled over and nearly screamed. Something, was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching her, smiling that too wide, crooked smile. It vanished when she turned on the light. By the end of the year, Maya had transferred to a different university. She thought she could leave it all behind. But sometimes in the dead of night, when everything is silent and still, Maya swears she hears it again. The knock under the bed. The dry, whispering voice. Come home, Maya. You belong to us now. And deep down she knows. You can leave room 413, but it never leaves you. Number 4. The reflection that wasn't mine. I moved into the old apartment because it was cheap. That should have been the first warning sign. The landlord barely looked me in the eye when I signed the papers. The walls were yellowed with age, the pipes moaned at night, and the heater made sounds like someone whispering through the vents. Still, I told myself it was fine. You don't get picky when you're broke. Room 206 has one peculiar feature. A giant, full-length mirror bolted to the wall between the tiny kitchen and the even tinier living room. The mirror was old, its surface spotted with age, its frame tarnished and cracked. I hate it. It felt like it was watching me. The first few nights I slept badly. Not because of sounds or cold, it was the feeling of being observed. Every time I crossed the living room, my reflection caught my eye. Except sometimes it didn't quite match me. A tilt of the head delayed by a second too long. A movement that didn't mirror mine exactly. I blamed it on exhaustion. Until the night I saw it smile. I wasn't smiling. But in the mirror, my reflection was a crooked, unnatural grin that stretched too wide across its face. I backed away slowly, refusing to turn my back to the glass. When I blinked, it was normal again. Just me. I told myself it was stressful. The next day, I draped a sheet over the mirror. Out of sight, out of mind. It worked, for a little while. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft scraping sound. Like nails dragging down glass. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, staring at the sheet-covered mirror. The sheet was moving. Something behind it was pressing out, hands, or some shape like hands, pushing against the fabric, stretching it outward like thin skin ready to tear. I stared, frozen, too scared to even breathe. Then the movement stopped. The sheet sagged limp. I sat there until dawn, staring at it, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing happened. I should have left. I should have packed my bags and never looked back. But I stayed. Because moving costs money and hope is a dangerous thing. Hope that it was all in my head, hope that it wouldn't happen again. The next night, I ripped the sheet down, determined to confront it. The mirror was just glass. Just a mirror. I stared at it for a long time, online it to move. It didn't. Finally, exhausted, I turned off the light and went to bed. At some point in the night, I woke up, not from a noise but from a feeling. I wasn't alone. In the darkness, I could barely make out the shape of the mirror across the room. And in it, my reflection was standing next to my bed. Watching me. Smiling. I was still lying down. But in the mirror, I was standing. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering against my ribs. When I opened them, it was gone. The next morning, I called the landlord. I demanded that he remove the mirror. There was a long pause on the phone. Then he said, voice low and tired, "It's not part of the apartment." "What do you mean?" "It's tied to the building. You can cover it if you want, but it stays." He hung up without another word. I stared at the mirror for a long time after that conversation. The reflection stared back, perfectly still. Over the next week, things got worse. The reflection started moving on its own. Sometimes when I walked by, I'd catch it frozen mid-step, facing the wrong way. Other times it would linger in the corner of the mirror, half hidden in shadow, watching me with gleaming eyes. I stopped sleeping. I barely ate. I couldn't bring myself to leave. The moment I stepped outside, my phone would ring, and there would be nothing but whispering on the other end. Or I'd catch a glimpse of myself in a window and see the reflection waving at me, backing me back. It was wearing me down. Breaking me. One night I cracked. I stood in front of the mirror, fists clenched, shaking with rage and fear. "What do you want?" I screamed. The reflection smiled, that same wide, awful grin, and pointed. Down. At the base of the mirror. Heart pounding, I got down on my knees and looked. There was a seam I hadn't noticed before. A tiny gap in the wall behind the mirror's frame. Hands trembling, I waited at it with a knife. The panel popped loose. Behind it was a small, dark cavity, and inside something wrapped in filthy cloth. I pulled it out, unwrapping layer after layer until I revealed what lay beneath. A mirror shard. Cracked, old, and stained with something dark. And carved into the glass, almost too faint to see, were words. "One must stay." I dropped it. Behind me, the mirror rippled like water. I turned just in time to see my reflection. The other me, step out of the glass. Step out of the glass. It stood there, breathing heavily, as real and solid as I was. Before I could move, it grabbed me. Its skin was ice cold. His hands were too strong. It shoved me hard, backwards, into the mirror. I fell through the surface as if falling into freezing water. I screamed, but no sound came out. I woke up on the other side. Everything was wrong. The apartment was twisted, dark, and rotting. The air smells like wet earth and decay. The mirror was now a window, and through it I could see my body, my double, moving around in my apartment, wearing my clothes, living my life. No one noticed. No one could hear me banging against the glass. I was trapped. And every so often I would double pause and stare into the mirror, smiling that awful smile. Watching me. Mocking me. That was months ago. I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't seem to move the same way. I'm not alone either. There are others trapped here with me. Silent shapes wandering the darkness beyond the mirror's reach. Once in a while, I see new faces pressed to the glass, desperate, terrified. Another soul tricked by a mirror that wasn't just a mirror. So if you ever move into a place with an old mirror bolted to the wall, if you ever catch your reflection, don't look too long. Don't listen to the whispers. And whatever you do, don't let it out. Number 5. The house that called me back. They said the Marrow house was cursed. It sat abandoned at the edge of our small town, forgotten under decades of dust and ivy. People whispered about it. Kids dared each other to sneak in and touch the front door. Some said you could hear crying from the attic. Others swore that once you enter, the house never really let you go. I didn't believe in any of it. Not until I went inside. It started as a stupid dare. Me and my best friends, Jared and Sam, standing at the rusted front gate as the sun dipped behind the trees. 5 minutes, Jared said, grinning. In and out. Easy. I rolled my eyes but climbed over the gate anyway, landing in the tall grass with a crunch. The house loomed above us, black windows like empty eyes, the porch sagging under years of rain and rot. The front door creaked open at the slightest push. Inside, it smells of wet wood, mold, and something else, something sour. I clicked on my flashlight. Dust floated thick in the air, and the walls were lined with faded portraits. Each one showed faces too blurred to recognize, their expressions a mix of sadness and something darker. The house groaned as we stepped inside, as if exhaling after a long time. We stayed together at first. Jared joked loudly, trying to scare Sam. Sam laughed too hard, clearly nervous. I tried to act cool, but every creak of the floorboards, every distant thump of the settling house, made my skin crawl. Let's check upstairs, Jared said. The staircase was narrow and steep. Halfway up, I felt a cold spot, a sudden icy chill that made my breath mist in front of me. At the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched into darkness. All the doors were closed, except one. It was slightly taut, a soft yellow light spilling out. Jared went first, pushing the door open wider. Inside was a child's bedroom. A broken rocking horse sat in the corner, and faded wallpaper peeled from the walls. The light came from an old oil lamp sitting on the floor. It was lit. None of us touched it. We left after that. Ran actually, laughing and swearing and pretending we weren't scared out of our minds. For a while I thought that was the end of it. But that night I dreamed of the Marrow house. In the dream I stood in the upstairs hallway again, staring at that open door. But this time something was standing just inside the room, a tall, thin figure, its face hidden in shadow. It raised a long bony hand and pointed at me. When I woke up, my bedroom was freezing, and muddy footprints led from my door to the side of my bed. Over the next week things got worse. I'd hear knocking at my window late at night, soft, polite knocks. I lived on the second floor. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of someone standing at the end of the hall when I left my room, just a tall, dark shape that disappeared when I blinked. I started seeing it during the day too. Reflections in windows, in puddles, in the TV screen when it was off, always pointing at me, always waiting. I tried to tell Jared and Sam. They brushed me off at first, until it started happening to them too. Sam called me one night, voice shaking. He said he saw the figure standing outside his house. When he looked again, it was in his kitchen, staring at him. Jared didn't say much, but I could see it in his face, the fear, the sleepless nights. We met one last time, desperate to figure out what to do. Maybe it's the house, I said. Maybe we woke something up. We have to go back, Jared said, jaw tight. Put it back to sleep. Or something. None of us wanted to, but we all knew it was the only choice. We returned to Marrow house at midnight. The place looked different, darker, heavier, like it was waiting for us. The front door swung open before we touched it. Inside, the air was thick, choking. The flashlight beams barely pierced the gloom. We made our way upstairs, back to the open door. The child's bedroom looked the same, but the lamp was gone. In its place was something new, a mirror, cracked and dirty, leaning against the far wall. Our reflections were distorted, twisted. And standing behind us in the glass was the tall figure, closer now, breathing, watching. We turned around. Nothing there. When we turned back to the mirror, Jared was gone from the reflection. So. And the thing. Just me. So. And the thing. We spun around, Jared was gone. No sound, no struggle. Just gone. We called his name. Searched the hallway, the rooms. Nothing. And then, the sound of footsteps above us. The attic. We didn't want to, but we had to go. The attic door was a narrow hatch in the ceiling, a rotating ladder leading up. Sam went first. I wait below, heart pounding. He pushed open the hatch, and immediately screamed. A horrible, raw scream that ended with a wet, choking sound. I backed away, terror freezing my limbs. Something heavy thudded down the stairs. So. His eyes were wide and glassy, mouth twisted in a silent scream. Something was wrong with his limbs, bent wrong like a puppet with cut strings. Behind him, pulling the strings, was the figure. It smiled at me. It was no longer just a shadow, now I could see it. Pale skin stretched too tightly over long bones, empty black holes for eyes, a mouth too wide and full of sharp, broken teeth. It reached me. I ran. I don't remember how I made it out of the house. I just remember cold air on my face, the crunch of grass underfoot. Number 6. The last train to Grenton Hollow. They told me not to take the late train. Every town has its rumors, and in Grenton Hollow the story went like this. The last train out of town, the one that rolled in after midnight, wasn't meant for the living. The old-timers say if you board it, you'll never come back. I wish to didn't believe any of it. I wish I had. It was a rainy Thursday night when it happened. I missed my regular 9:30 train by minutes. My phone was dead, the station was nearly empty, and the rain made it miserable to wait outside. I cursed my luck, pacing under the flickering lights. At 12:04 a.m., I heard the low rumble of wheels on the tracks. A train, ancient and massive, pulled into the station with a screech of iron against iron. No logos. It didn't look like the modern commuter trains. This one was all heavy black steel with old-fashioned lanterns swinging from the sides, casting dim yellow light. No logos. No announcements. Just the sound of the rain, the hiss of the brakes, and the doors sliding open. The conductor stood outside the nearest car, silent. He wore a uniform that looked 100 years old, dark navy blue with tarnished brass buttons, and a cap pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his eyes, only the sharp white smile that stretched too wide. "Last train to Grenton Hollow," he said, voice flat. I hesitated. He tilted his head. Waiting. Cold, tired, and desperate to get home, I stepped inside. The doors slammed shut behind me. Inside, the train was freezing. The seats were old leather, cracked and faded, the floors scuffed wood instead of the usual plastic. The air smelled faintly of smoke and mildew. There were other passengers, but they all sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Their faces were pale, too pale, and their clothes looked wrong. Old-fashioned. Torn. Mud-stained. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter around me. The train lurched forward with a jolt. Outside the windows, there was nothing but darkness. No streetlights, no houses, no trees. Just an endless black void. I tried not to panic. Maybe it's an old line, I told myself. Maybe it's just one of those historic trains. A tourist thing. But deep down, I knew better. About 20 minutes into the ride, the lights began to flicker. The passengers still didn't move, but something else did. From the end of the car, a figure began to walk slowly toward me, jerky, unnatural steps, like its joints didn't bend the right way. It wore a tattered dress, soaked and clinging to its frame. Its hair hangs in wet, stringy clumps over its face. And it made a sound, a low, rattling wheeze like it was struggling to breathe. I turned away, heart hammering, pretending not to see it. But when I looked back, it was closer. One row behind me now. And the passengers, they were all smiling. Wide, frozen smiles like puppets. I stood up, stumbling down the aisle toward the next car. The doors resisted at first, stuck tight, but I yanked hard and slipped through. The next car was worse. It was empty at first. But as I moved forward, shapes began to appear in the seats. Shadowy figures, hunched and whispering in voices too low to understand. The walls dripped with moisture, the air thick and heavy. Every step I took, the car seemed to stretch longer, the far door grew farther away. Behind me, the rattling breath grew louder. I didn't look back. I ran. I burst into the next car and froze. It wasn't a passenger car at all. It was a morgue. Cold metal tables lined the walls, each one holding a covered body. The fluorescent lights above buzzed weakly, casting sickly green shadows. I backed away, but the door slammed shut behind me. One by one, the bodies began to twitch under the sheets. Fingers clawed at the fabric. Mouths opened in silent screams. One sat up, a woman with half her face missing, her remaining eyes wide and unblinking. She pointed at me. "You're not supposed to be here," she rasped. I screamed, hammering on the door until it finally gave way. Stumbling into the next car, I collapsed onto the floor. This car was different. Looked normal. Almost. Passengers sat calmly in their seats, reading newspapers, sipping coffee. But when they looked up at me, I saw their eyes. Completely black. Empty. One by one they smiled. And the newspapers they held disintegrated into ash. The coffee cups melted into black sludge. The walls of the car pulsed and breathed like living flesh. The overhead lights turned red. The conductor appeared at the far end, still smiling. "Next stop," he said. "Grenton Hollow?" I knew I had to get off. But where? There were no windows anymore. Just endless, shifting darkness outside. The train began to slow down. A screech of brakes. A jolt that nearly threw me from my feet. The doors slide open, revealing a platform shrouded in thick, swirling fog. And figures waiting in the mist. Dozens of them. All pale, all smiling, arms reaching out for me. I backed away. "No," I whispered. "I don't belong here." The conductor stepped toward me, tipping his hat to reveal his face. There was nothing there. Just a smooth expansion of skin where eyes and a nose should have been, and that terrible, stretched grin. "You got on the train," he said softly. "You belong." The passengers stood up, surrounding me. Hands grabbed my arms, pulling, dragging. I kicked and fought, but it was no use. The fog swallowed me whole. I woke up on a platform. It was morning, bright, sunny, normal. I stumbled to my feet, shaking. A commuter train whooshed past, people chatting and laughing, oblivious. Has it all been a nightmare? A hallucination? I checked my phone, full battery, messages from friends wondering where I'd been. Relief flooded me. I turned to leave the station and froze. In the reflection of the glass doors, I saw them. The pale passengers. Smiling. Waiting. And somewhere in the distance, I heard it again, the low, rumbling sound of the last train to Grenton Hollow. Coming back for me. Number 7. The house at Blackwood Lane. When we first moved to Blackwood Lane, everyone warned us about the house across the street. It stood apart from the others, taller, darker, its windows permanently shuttered, its roof sagging under years of neglect. It looked abandoned, but sometimes late at night, you could swear you saw lights moving behind the curtains. Or figures. Stories about people who went inside and were if they come back, the neighbors spoke in hushed voices. Stories about people who went inside and were never quite the same afterward. If they come back at all. We laughed it off. Urban legends, that's all. But the house wasn't laughing. It was watched. It started small. At first, it was the feeling of being watched whenever I passed by the windows. Then things escalated. Doors inside our home began to creak open on their own. Shadows darted in the corners of our vision. Cold spots appear in rooms that should have been warm. One night, I found muddy footprints in our hallway, small, barefoot prints leading from the front door to the living room and back out again. Except we had locked the door. And we didn't have children. My wife, Emily, wanted to leave. I should have listened to her. The worst night was when the knock came. 3 sharp raps at our door just after 2 a.m. I woke up with a start, heart pounding. Emily clutched my arm, wide-eyed. "Don't open it," she whispered. But something forced me. A deep, crawling urge that wasn't entirely mine. I approached the door, my hand trembling. The peephole showed nothing but darkness. Still, I opened it. Standing there was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, suspenders, a too large cap, muddy boots. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were completely black. No whites. No pupils. Just endless, glimmering darkness. He smiled, and it was wrong, too wide, too sharp. "Can I come in?" he asked. I slammed the door so hard the frame cracked. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found a note slipped under our door. It was written in a shaky, childlike scratch. "You're already inside." I didn't understand until I turned around. The house across the street, the one we had been avoiding, now had its front door wide open. Waiting. "Unline us," Emily cried, begging me to leave it alone. But I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. At sunset, I crossed the street. The neighbors watched through their curtains but said nothing. The porch groaned under my weight as I stepped up. The door swung open before I could touch it. Inside, the house was colder than any winter. Cobwebs draped the walls. Dust hung thick in the air. And yet, the floor was clean of footprints except for a trail leading deeper inside. I followed. Room after room revealed nothing but decay, broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, shattered mirrors. But in the heart of the house, I found something else. A staircase, leading down into utter darkness. Something was whispering from below. My name. Against every instinct screaming inside me, I descended. The basement was vast, far larger than the footprint of the house should allow. Its walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with slow, wet movements. At the center stood a mirror. Tall, cracked, its surface rippling like black water. And standing before it was the boy. He turned to face me, smiling that same broken smile. "I brought you here," he said. From the mirror, hands began to emerge, pale, skeletal hands clawing at the edges. Faces pressed against the glass, mouthing silent screams. "You belong to the house now," the boy whispered. The hand grabbed me. I don't remember how I escaped. One moment I was drowning in cold, grasping hands. The next I was stumbling back onto the street, gasping for air, the door of the house slamming shut behind me. But everything has changed. Our home doesn't feel like our home anymore. The rooms were off, slightly too big, slightly too dark. Sometimes when I look in the mirrors, I see reflections that don't match. A tilt of the head, a twitch of a smile. Emily tried to pretend everything was fine, but I could see it too. We were still inside the house. We never left. It's been weeks now. The neighbors don't look at us anymore. Sometimes at night I see figures standing. Sometimes they whisper to each other in languages I don't understand. And every now and then, when the light catches just right, I catch a glimpse of the boy, standing in the mirror, grinning, waiting. The door to the basement, the real basement, not ours, is back. It's calling. I know that soon I'll answer. You can't escape the house at Blackwood Lane. Once it lets you in, it never lets you leave. Number 8. The Vanishing at Ashford Manor. Ashford Manor has always been the subject of whispered tales in the town. Hidden away on a hill, it was a sprawling estate that had stood for centuries, untouched by time yet tainted by the rumors surrounding it. The locals avoided the place, especially after sunset, claiming that it was haunted by the spirits of those who had once lived there. And yet I couldn't resist. I had been drawn to Ashford Manor since I was a child. My fascination only grew when I moved to the town for college. The rumors persisted, about the strange disappearances, the unexplained noises, and the fact that people who entered the house after dark sometimes never came back. I brushed it all off as superstition, a town's way of giving the past some mystique. But there was something about that house, its decaying grandeur, that haunted me. One evening, my curiosity got the better of me. It was the night of the full moon, and the air was thick with mist. I stood at the edge of Ashford Manor's long, winding driveway, staring at the dark windows that seemed to watch me. A chill ran down my spine, but I shook it off. I had to go inside, I had to know the truth. The moment I stepped onto the grounds, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The air smelled of mildew, dust, and something heavier. The manor loomed ahead, its Gothic spires reaching into the night sky like claws. As I approached the front door, I felt a sudden, inexplicable hesitation. It was as if the house itself was warning me. But I knocked. The door creaked open before I could even touch the handle. An old woman stood in the doorway. She was frail, her face lined with deep wrinkles, her eyes a piercing blue that seemed to see right through me. Her hair was long and silver, her hands shook slightly as she gripped the doorframe. "You've come to see the house," she said, her voice rasping with age. "Come in then." I didn't hesitate, though I should have. There was something in her gaze, something unnerving. But I couldn't turn back now. Inside, the house was a maze of dimly lit rooms, each more unsettling than the last. The air felt dense, like it had been trapped inside for centuries. The floors creaked beneath my feet as I followed the old woman deeper into the house. Her presence seemed to pull me along as if I had no choice but to obey. "This place, it has a life of its own," she said as we walked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It watches you. It remembers." I didn't ask what she meant. I was too busy taking in the strange architecture, the walls adorned with faded tapestries and dusty portraits of people I didn't recognize. The farther we went, the darker it became. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls, twisting them into grotesque shapes. We reached a door at the end of a long hallway. The old woman motioned for me to enter. Inside, the room was dim, the only light came from a single candle on the far side of the room. It was small, with shelves filled with books and strange trinkets. At the center was a large mirror, old and tarnished with age. It stood there like a sentinel reflecting nothing but darkness. "The mirror," she said, her voice filled with a strange reverence. "It shows things. Things that have been, and things that will be." I looked at the mirror, feeling its cold surface pulling me in. The reflection was distorted, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I saw a figure in the mirror, standing just behind me, a tall man, his face obscured in shadow. His presence sent a chill down my spine, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. The old woman laughed, a low, unsettling sound. "It sees you too." I felt the room close in around me. The air was thick, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in. I turned back to the mirror, but the figure was gone. "I think it's time for you to leave," she said suddenly, her voice no longer soft but sharp like a knife. "You've seen enough." I tried to turn and walk away, but my legs felt heavy, like they were rooted to the floor. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. The candlelight flickered, and I could hear the sound of footsteps approaching from the darkness. I spun around, but there was no one there. The house has come alive. The walls groaned, the floorboards trembled, and the mirror, oh, the mirror, it began to pulse, its surface rippling like water. The air grew thick with whispers, voices that seemed to come from all directions, but I couldn't make out the words. I was trapped. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't obey. The voices grew louder, their whispers turned into shouts, demands, pleading. I felt hands reaching for me, cold and invisible, pulling me closer to the mirror. "Help me!" I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the sound of the house. The floor beneath me buckled, and I was falling into the mirror, into the darkness. Number 9. The Siren's Song. The town of Eldridge Falls has always been a quiet, peaceful place. Nestled beside a large, serene lake, it was the kind of place that tourists passed through without much thought. A couple of small shops, a diner, a few houses scattered across the hills and the lake, that was the town. But beneath its tranquil surface, there were whispers of a darkness older than the town itself. The locals called it the Siren's Song. The story went like this. Long ago there was a woman who lived near the lake. Her name was Lila, and she was said to have a voice like no other, beautiful, haunting, capable of making anyone who heard it fall into a trance. They said her singing could be heard across the water, especially during the quiet, moonlit nights. But Lila wasn't just a singer. No, she was a creature of the lake, a siren cursed to lure sailors and travelers into the depths. Those who heard her song would feel an overwhelming desire to jump into the water and swim towards her. They never returned. As time passed, Lila's song became more than just a warning. It became a legend, a story told to children, a reason to stay away from the lake after dark. The people of Eldridge Falls began to fear the water, and the song was almost forgotten, until I came to town. I was just passing through, a rider on the road looking for inspiration. I'd heard about Eldridge Falls from a friend who said it was the perfect place for quiet reflection, with plenty of nature and solitude to fuel my creative spirit. I didn't believe the rumors about the sirens, of course. Legends were just stories after all. I rented a small cabin by the lake, the perfect spot to get away from the world for a while. The place was charming with a rustic feel, and the view of the water was peaceful. Each evening, I sat on the porch with a notebook in hand, listening to the rustling of the trees, the chirping of the crickets, and the soft lapping of the water against the shore. And then one night I heard it. A voice. At first I thought it was just the wind or perhaps someone else near the lake. But then the melody became clearer, more distinct. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but it carried with it an undeniable pull like a magnet. It was beautiful, the kind of beauty that makes you want to close your eyes and surrender to it. I stepped out of my cabin, drawn by the sound. The water was cool, the sky was full of stars, and the water of the lake reflected the moonlight like a mirror. The song seemed to come from the far side of the lake, just out of sight. I should have turned back. I should have listened to the instinct in my gut that told me something was wrong. But I didn't. I walked closer to the shore, my feet carrying me toward the water's edge. It was then that I saw her. She was standing on a rock in the middle of the lake, bathed in the silver light of the moon. Her hair flowed like dark waves, and her eyes shone with an intensity that made my heart race. Her voice wrapped around me like a warm embrace, pulling me closer, urging me to come to her. I don't know how long I stood there lost in her song, but something was changing. The world around me felt like it was slipping away. The air grew colder, the water seemed to rise higher, and the siren's song became louder, more insistent. Before I could stop myself, I took a step into the water. I woke up on the shore, drenched, shivering, and with no memory of how I'd gotten there. The sun was just beginning to rise and the song had stopped. The lake was still, as if nothing had happened. I stood up, my legs were weak, and stumbled back to my cabin. I was terrified. The pull of the song had been so strong, so hypnotic, that it felt as though I had been caught in a trance. But the lake was peaceful now. Number 10. The Forgotten House. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway. A short trip with friends to escape the chaos of city life, to breathe fresh air, and to enjoy nature. The place we rented was a charming old house on the outskirts of a small town called Harrow's End. It was situated on the edge of a dense forest, surrounded by towering pines and a quiet, murky lake. The perfect spot for a secluded retreat. None of us had heard much about the house itself, other than a vague mention from the owner that it had been in his family for generations. But that was enough for me. The pictures online looked picturesque. A cozy, rustic cottage with a stone fireplace and a wraparound porch. It seemed ideal for our weekend plans. We arrived on Friday afternoon, our car slowly making its way up a narrow gravel driveway that led through a dense thicket of trees. The house, although old and weathered, has a certain charm to it. Its ivy-covered walls and sagging roof were reminders of an era long gone, but it still had a beauty in its decay. The owner had left us a key under a flower pot near the door, and with that, we were left to explore. The first few hours were blissfully uneventful. We unpacked, made drinks, and explored the surrounding area. The forest felt ancient, as though it had been untouched for centuries. We joked about ghosts and legends, pretending to be brave in the face of an old, empty house in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't until nightfall that things started to feel off. We had gathered in the living room, sitting around the fire, telling stories and laughing. The wind outside howled, sending branches scraping against the windows, and a steady pattern of rain began to fall. But amidst the cozy ambience, there was a strange tension in the air. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching us. The strangest thing happened when we went to bed. I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in the dark, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't be quiet. I kept hearing noises, soft creaks, the whisper of something moving just out of sight. At first, I thought it was the house settling, the kind of noise you would expect from a place this old. But it didn't feel normal. It felt deliberate. Around 3 a.m. I finally got up, my curiosity getting the better of me. The hallway outside my room was dark, and the house seemed strangely cold. I stepped out into the corridor and followed the sound of footsteps. Soft, uneven steps. They seemed to echo from the floorboards below me as though someone, or something, was walking around downstairs. My heart raced, but I told myself it was probably one of my friends. Maybe they couldn't sleep either. I reached the stairs and started to descend, the creaky wood groaning under my weight. But as I stepped onto the bottom floor, I froze. The house was completely silent. No footsteps, no sounds. Just the steady hum of the wind and the soft patter of rain. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm myself before turning around to head back up to my room. That's when I saw it. At the end of the hallway near the kitchen, a door stood slightly ajar. A faint, flickering light came from within. I felt drawn to it, an inexplicable pull urging me forward. My instincts screamed at me to turn around and go back to bed, but my legs moved of their own accord. I walked closer to the door, the light grew brighter, yet I couldn't hear a thing. No hum of a light bulb, no buzz of electricity. Just an eerie stillness. I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, save for a single old-fashioned lamp sitting on the floor in the center of the room. It flickered in an irregular pattern, casting strange shadows across the walls. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement, but there was nothing. That's when I noticed the wall. The room had wallpaper, but it was peeling in a way that seemed unnatural. It was as if the wallpaper had been torn off and hastily replaced. There were dark marks on the wall, like smudges of something that had been wiped away but never fully cleaned. I approached the wall, my hand reached out to touch it. That's when I saw the writing. The words were scrawled in red ink, jagged and uneven, as if written in haste or despair. Don't let it in. It wants to be free. I recoiled, a chill ran down my spine. The writing seemed fresh, almost wet to the touch. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I spun around, my breath quickening. The light in the room flickered, then died, leaving me in complete darkness. I felt the walls closing in, the air thickening as if something was pressing against me, suffocating me. I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then a voice. It was low, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakable. Help me. I turned around, my eyes straining to see in the pitch black. There, in the corner of the room, a figure stood. Its outline was hazy, indistinct, like a shadow bleeding into the walls. Its face was pale and contorted, eyes wide with terror. It stepped forward, slowly, dragging its feet along the floor with a wet, sucking sound. "Help me," the voice repeated. I screamed and slammed my shoulder against the door. It gave way with a sharp crack and I tumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. The figure in the room was gone, but the stench of decay lingered in the air, and the writing on the wall burned itself into my mind. I ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night, my mind replaying the events over and over. What had I seen? Was it a dream? A trick of the light? Or something more sinister? The next morning I told my friends what had happened, but they laughed it off, thinking I had just been scared by an old house. But there was something in the air, a quiet ease that none of us could shake. The house, once charming and mysterious, now feels oppressive, as if it were hiding something dark, something malevolent. We decided to leave early, but as we packed ours, and when we left the house, I looked back one last time. In the window I saw the same figure. Eyes wide, staring.